Hey, friends, welcome back to the Reason Reality Podcast. I am your host, Joe Smith, and with me today, I'm really excited because I've got two people that I hold in really high esteem, and I'm excited about where this conversation goes. Maybe excited is not the right word because it's such a heavy season, but I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. And first up, we have Lisa Sharon Harper. Lisa is a writer, a public theologian, activist, and founder of Freedom Road. And she has spent decades helping people wrestle honestly with history and race and faith, and the stories that we all tell about ourselves, about who we are or where we're headed. And you might know her from her books, The Very Good Gospel, or Fortune, How Race Broke My Family and the World and How to Repair It All, where she blends her personal story with theology and social critique in a way that's both challenging and deeply human. And I mentioned this just a second ago, Lisa, off camera, about how much I enjoyed your reading of that on the Audible, about how it just, I don't want to say performance, that's not the right word, but embodied. You just lived it and it came across and just like I felt like you were in the room with me telling me this story. So so thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Absolutely. We're also joined by Kristian A. Smith, and Kristian is a pastor, community builder, and host of the Holy Smokes Cigar and Spirituality podcast. He's also a rabble rouser, and I so much enjoy that about your social media presence. Like, you just don't pull any punches, you don't take any crap, and I love it. Sarcasm is a love language for me. So,
likewise.
Yeah. So Kristian brings this grounded, thoughtful, no-nonsense approach to conversations about faith and deconstruction and what it means to love God and love people in the real world. And his work is all about building beloved community and pushing back on the kinds of theology that harm more than they heal. I am so grateful to have both of you here today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So I just kind of wanted to jump into it. I had reached out to you guys, I don't know, it was like November, December, and it's kind of talking about, we all survived. Well, not all of us survived 2025. And kind of like, we all knew it was going to be bad. I don't know. I know that there were some people, I don't know if in my heart of hearts, I believed it was going to be as bad as it has become. And so I really wanted to kind of get some perspective from different people on what we survived and where we're headed, like what's next. Not just politically, but like culturally as a people. And I listen to all your stuff, both of you, and your perspectives and your thoughts inform a lot of how I move through the world. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to reach out to these guys, and this is the conversation that I want to have. So I guess I just really want to start it off with just like, how? Why? What?
Okay. Like,
what's happening, right?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Yeah. Kristian, why don't you start?
Oh boy, where are we? I think we are in the place that Black people have been saying we're going to be in for generations. And I think it's becoming a reality for other culture groups. Because, I pay attention to and study a lot of history. So one of my favorite historians is Dr. John Henrik Clarke. And in a lecture he did back in like the 80s, he talked about how basically white people are working towards the re-enslavement of Black people. He said that back in the 80s. Like, they are working on the re-enslavement of Black people.
Yeah.
And, just this week, Trump got in front of a camera and said I don't even say the quiet part out loud. He reiterated that their concern is that white people aren't getting the fair treatment that they should be getting. In a country where white people own all the wealth, have been in power for the entire history of the country. During 2025, Black unemployment skyrocketed. I mean, these are all policy decisions. So, and Black people, going back to Black Lives Matter and the different movements that we've had, Say Her Name, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, and then going back even to the civil rights movement of the 20th century. People have always told us like, oh, you're making a big deal out of it. It's not that bad. They should have complied. We don't know what happened before the video started.
Where'd that all go?
Yeah. Right. And it's because what we experience isn't really important to the rest of the country. Mm. So now that tyranny is coming to the front doors, the literal front doors of other communities, now it's panic and urgency. And Black people are out line dancing because we're accustomed to living through craziness. It's just now everybody's experiencing it. Mm. Stop and frisk happened primarily in Black and brown communities when it happened. Mm-hmm. And we've always had the talk with kids in our communities about dealing with law enforcement. And not because of something we saw on TV, but because of our own lived experiences. And when NWA came out with F the Police, everybody said that was ridiculous. And now the same people are saying F ICE, abolish ICE. Because you're starting to have the experiences that we've been having. So now the question is, what are y'all gonna do about it? What are the people gonna do about it? Because Black people are not gonna get on the front lines of this fight. We can't help but be a part of it because this is our life too. But we're not gonna be the sacrificial lamb that you put on the front line so that we can get we can have that violence enacted upon us first, because that's been our experience, that's been our history. And that's just it, like, just in a nutshell from what I am observing. I'd love to know what Dr. Lisa will have to say.
Well, it's funny because actually where I was going is very similar. I was thinking, literally woke up with this thought today, and I wrote it down. Actually, let me just break this out. Yeah. And I'll share with you exactly what I wrote down. I wrote down, in my little iCloud notes. This is what I wrote. If I can find it. Here it is. If you ever wondered what it would be like to live in the post-Reconstruction South, you're seeing it in Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And actually, my very first thought, I changed it. My very first thought was, if you ever wondered what it would be like to live on a plantation in the antebellum South, you're seeing it in Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. I changed it to post-Reconstruction because I think it's slightly more accurate. But I do think, I think that what you said about the desire of some white folk to return to slavery, what we are experiencing is the Civil War. Mm-hmm. The Civil War never ended. Mm-hmm. We've been fighting the Civil War since it began. It never ended. It only morphed. It changed. And now we actually see, the constant militarization of our police force since, some people call it public safety, but it's never been public safety. It's actually been about cordoning off Black people from everybody else, and not just Black people, but non-white people from everyone else since its inception. What we're seeing is the over-militarization of that in order to contain and control non-white bodies in a world where white-bodied people, particularly those who are more resourced, are deathly afraid, to the bones, of the demographic shift happening in our nation. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And that shift is coming quicker than they even predicted. Some people are now saying, they used to say 2045. It's not 2045. Some people said 2035. It's not even 2035. It is 2030. That is, what's that? 4 years away. 4 years away.
Yeah.
There will be a majority people of color nation in the U.S. And the funny thing is, I mean, this is the funniest thing, is that, white folk were so afraid because they would racialize those numbers, right? White, non-white. Non-whites are going to be against us. Therefore, we need to kick them all out of the country. So now we quote, crack down, even though I've been saying for a long time, stop with that language of crack down, because you only crack down on stuff that's bad, right? Like you crack down on mom and dad, crack down when you're not doing your homework, right? Like, but they start this pogrom, this ethnic cleansing of Latinos in particular. And the most ironic thing is they could have had half of those Latinos on their side. They could have actually secured white power by going after white Latinos, white racialized Latinos. And they would have had them. In fact, a lot of people, especially Cubans, white Cubans did come in the direction of Trump in 2024. But forevermore, or at least for the next 2-3 generations, they have lost that battle. So there is no chance now. There is no chance that there's going to be a winning over of the minds and hearts of any people of color in the U.S. after what is happening right now. And so there's got to be, I mean, the only solution in my mind is that there is a deep reckoning and repentance of the true, like in the sinews, like in the marrow belief of people deemed white in the U.S. that white is supreme and therefore a little g God. White is the closest thing to God, if not God itself. And there needs to be a repentance from that. There needs to be a stepping down off of the scaffolding of whiteness onto the soil of humanity. That's the only way. There is no other way that we get to peace in this nation, because we will be fighting a perpetual war. There's no other way than repentance. That's why this moment we're in right now, you can look at this and you can say it's a political moment, but politics is only the conversations we have and the decisions that we make about how we live together as a society. And the thing that is driving the decisions that we have made is a spiritual ailment. It is a usurping of the supremacy of God by people who have been deemed white by the state.
Dr. Lisa, you just said so much, and the last thing that you said reminded me of something that Dr. Otis Moss III told me his dad shared with him that I've just been repeating, and about how it's political, but it's not just political.
Yeah.
And that these colonial imperial movements, there are 3 stages to the process. There are three commitments or three items that have to be checked off in order for these movements to work. So the first thing is economic profitability. Does it make money? Right? There's the critique of capitalism, the colonial project. Does it make money? Does it make economic sense? That's why our ancestors were captured and forced into a lifetime of servitude, because that was the way for the colonial powers to make money. So the first step is economic profitability. Then the next step is political viability. Can we make sense of this politically? And then the last step is theological acceptability. So you use theology to move forward with the political and economic agenda that was established before the theology even came into play.
Yeah, that's
we
right.
want to make money. We want to have political power. Now, how can we create a theology that supports that? Which is how you get manifest destiny, which is how you get Noah's curse of Ham, and how that all of a sudden makes Black people subservient to white people. And it's how you get the sin of empathy, which is what Christian nationalists are currently spreading, because you need theological acceptability for the violence that you want to enact. So
Wait, can I? Oh, go on. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I got excited for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to interject because I want to also add that this is also where you get the city on the hill.
Yes.
And the city on the hill, which is one of the main narratives that is pushed by the left. I mean, this is something, the city on the hill was actually lifted up by Obama. And so the thing that we have to, I've been listening a lot recently to Tad Sturmer, and I had him on my podcast, and we had a really great conversation. And one of the things that he made really clear is that the liberal project, as much as the conservative project, both actually exist to protect the status quo, to protect things as they are. And we have to be honest about and this is people on the progressive side of the spectrum need to be honest about how things are and how they were created to be. Lincoln did not actually want to free the slaves, right? And at the same time, the same day that he made the Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863, that same day, he hung several Native American people out on the plains in Minnesota, right? So we have to be honest about this, the foundations of this project. And I think that's what I appreciate about what you're saying, Kristian, is this thing, this land that we're living on, this government that we sit in, it existed to do one thing, make money.
Yes.
That was the reason it was created. They were created as colonies for empire. And eventually those colonies said, yo, we have rights too. And so we became a government. But even when we were writing our constitution, we made sure to embed in that constitution the money factor, which is the 3/5 compromise.
Absolutely.
The reality that Black folk who were here were only considered to be 3/5 of a human being. Why? Because they were not about to give up on slavery. Some people were like, oh, increments, let's incrementally let it go for the sake of the economy, for the sake of the union, always for the sake of the union. And the union is there to protect the economy. So let's not get it twisted. If we actually want peace, like real peace, like shalom, like salam, like God's kind of peace, then we are going to have to go down to the bones of what this nation exists to do and ask, do we exist to make money, or do we exist to help people, all people, to flourish in who God created us to be? Those are two very different visions. And I think we're at a place right now where people are so desperate, they might actually be willing to consider the one that we have not been willing to consider for 400 years, 500 years.
So growing up, as you all are talking, I didn't want to interrupt anything that was happening there, because that was just keep rolling. But you were talking about the pedestal of whiteness, or that
the scaffolding.
Thank you. And it made me think about me growing up. I grew up in a very homogenous. It was, 99 point something % white. Everybody was church and conservative, and it just that's what it was. And when deconstruction finally found me, because it wasn't something I was looking for, right? That's never how it works. One of the hardest parts of my deconstruction was decolonizing my faith and recognizing that the lens that I had been given was white supremacy, like not the like hood and fire and stuff, but it was just that really subtle, almost, I would say even more sinister, because it just hides. Like the theologian that was huge in my home church that our pastor quoted all the time was Jonathan Edwards.
Oh yeah.
You know, Jonathan Edwards was like the man for us growing up. And that was just normal, you know, and then like recognizing, oh my God, that is not what did he, and you're preaching about this guy, you know, so that was earth shattering to understand that, like, oh my gosh, this God that's been handed to me is the same God that like blessed these things from the stage, you know, and said, yeah, they're less than, you can own them. That's fine.
Yeah. That's right.
And that was the hardest part. There's no question in that. Just when you said that, I was just like, yeah.
Yeah. I always say indoctrination is a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
It literally shapes your perception of the world. It shapes your basic understanding. And it is beyond question until you decide to question it. So, you know, when I'm having conversations with people theologically, I always start with the basic paradigm. What is the basis of truth from which you work? What are your arguments grounded in? And a lot of people don't know what that is. Because they've never questioned it, because it just is. Well, I mean, of course the Bible is inerrant. Of course the Bible is infallible. We don't question that. We just accept it as is. Of course God is a white man. Of course Jesus is a white man. Of course the Holy Spirit is a white man. We don't question that. It just is what. Of course women are subservient. That's nature. You see? And it's all indoctrination. But when you've never had the space to question it, it just shapes your reality.
Yeah.
So, and that's why deconstruction is so jarring for people, because it shifts your perspective of reality. And that's heavy. And most people don't want to do that.
No.
Even with Black people. Like I do deconstruction content with Black people in mind, because I recognize that the deconstruction space was very Anglo, very Caucasian.
Yes.
And talking specifically to the experiences of white people. And I was like, Black people's spirituality is so much different than this. So like, we need something that speaks to how we move through the world. But even with Black people, like questioning the Bible, oh God, they'd be ready to toss me off of a building.
Throw down. You're gonna throw down. That's for real.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's also, of course, the vestiges of the plantation system that were kind of infused in the system of Black church and Black family life. You know, especially in the form of patriarchy, hard patriarchy, sometimes violent patriarchy. You know, and the reality yet and still is that people of African descent in the United States and around the world are human. And so we have every color of the rainbow in terms of levels of health and levels of well-being in families. And there is no one monolithic understanding or experience of Black family or Black church. But that said, we do reflect we often reflect the patriarchal structures that we encountered on the plantation. And so the decolonizing work for us, you're totally right, Kristian. It looks different, but the need for it is no less. And actually, I mean, a lot of it has to do with we're just getting to know ourselves. Like just in the last 20 years, we have DNA, right? So we can actually trace our DNA to actual peoples on the continent. And before that, we had the wisdom of our grandparents and our ancestors that was handed down by generations. And that is fabulous and wonderful. But much of that wisdom was born out of the fires of white supremacy and oppression here on Western soil. But what happens when we jump over the Atlantic and we go back to our native land and we learn the things that we never learned here, or the things that we've lost because we've taken on too much of the assumptions of the empire.
Yeah.
For example, okay, so Black Panther. Can we just talk about, I love me some Black Panther. Okay.
Absolutely.
So Wakanda forever, like,
Yes.
cross the arms, and yes. But when I was talking with my South African friends about it, they rolled their eyes. I was like, what? How is this possible? I mean, literally, they are in the movie. They actually used South African cultures in order to craft, the costumes and the language and it should have been honoring. Why are they rolling their eyes? This is why they're rolling their eyes. Because at the heart of that narrative is the belief, and it comes out in the very end, right? Is the belief that are these two characters. There's the character that is left behind, the African American, basically, right? Who comes back and he's confronting the people of Wakanda. And he's like, y'all left me out to dry. That's why I'm going to get mine now, right? And then the Wakanda is basically saying, but you're evil, and so you cannot take over here, and all of that. Well, the people of South Africa, who actually, I can't say all, but the people I know there, they looked at that and they shook their head. They just said, it is an absolute break from Central African values. There would never, ever be a nation in Africa that had plenty and did not share it with all around. There would never be justification for leaving somebody out, for excluding somebody because they didn't have. That is a vestige of empire that we didn't even catch in our own writing of a story that is supposed to be decolonizing. And so there's an even deeper need for that decolonizing work that we have to do in ourselves. I mean, another one, I'm sorry, I'm just going to say, and this goes back to the scripture, same person, same South African, just wise woman, Dr. Renee, she's not doctor, but I call her Dr. Renee August. She's Reverend Renee August. She was mentored by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and she's a dear friend and colleague. She has done an incredible study of Joseph. And Joseph, we love the story of Joseph as African Americans. He is one to be revered because, he was sold into slavery. And yet, but God, what the devil meant for evil, God meant for good, and God raised him up to lead everybody. That's the narrative we tell. But she goes to that scripture and she asks, where do we see power moving in that scripture? And what we see is Joseph actually enacting the logics of empire. And he ends up taking all of the money and all of the resources from the people, and they are left eating dirt in the end, completely dependent on him. And for her, this African woman, to bring out, she raises this new way of looking at Joseph because her eyes have not been colonized, or she's gone through a decolonizing process of her own. But she's able to show us, oh, look, you're looking at this passage and you're not seeing something that's there, maybe because you've been soaking in Western culture and values more than you think.
So you just reminded me of an article that we read in seminary that opened up my eyes drastically, because another Bible story that we are taught to revere and celebrate is Joshua fit the Battle of Jericho.
Oh,
we
yes.
love to talk about how
Come
Joshua
on.
and the children of Israel walked around the wall 7 times. Early on in my preaching career, that passage was like one of my top sermons. I was preaching that sermon all around the country, going in circles was the name of the sermon. People loved it, ate it up everywhere I went. Then I went to seminary and I read an article written by an indigenous American who said, when I see that story, I experience it from the perspective of somebody inside the wall. Somebody living in Jericho, who that's all you know. That's your whole life. That's where your people are from for generations. And then these outsiders come and say, this is our land now. And then they commit genocide against the people inside the walls.
That's right.
And I said, ooh, maybe I need to rethink my celebration of this story.
Maybe. That's right. That's right. That's exactly what I'm talking about is, I mean, I feel like there's a process that we all have to go through of decolonizing our minds, our eyes, the way we see God, the way we see ourselves, the way we see each other. And there are different processes, and there's a different process that our indigenous brothers and sisters are going through when they engage in that decolonizing work for white people deemed white by the state. There's another process that is necessary for them and for us as people of African descent, another process for us.
It's so funny you were talking about that. One of the things that like really struck me a few years ago, in that whole process, you know, how it's different for everybody. But, I'm not by nature, I'm not a confrontational person. I don't shy away from it, but it's not my first go-to or whatever. I can. I'm a friendly person. I'm outgoing. I try to get along with everybody that I know. And I've always been that way. So like, I've always been comfortable in spaces, in almost any space I have felt, comfortable. And I served on a local, our Pride Community Center board for several years. And on the board, oftentimes I was the only straight person on the board. And I was thinking about it, and it never bothered me. Like, okay, whatever. And honestly, I thought it was just because I was a nice guy. And I don't remember what triggered something for me. I just can't remember what it was. But it was this revelation where this light came on, and I was just like, oh my God, maybe I am a nice guy, but that's not why I feel so comfortable. What I realized is that growing up, I mean, I'm a white, straight Christian male in the United States, right? Like this place was made for me. Like that's just how it is.
Yeah.
What I realized is that I could go into almost any space and feel comfortable. I could go into any room and feel comfortable, not because I'm a nice guy, but because when I walked into that room was mine.
Ooh, that's a good way to put it. Wow.
It was my room. Why would I be uncomfortable in my room? Like, welcome to my room. Right? So like every room I go into is mine. And that was never said to me explicitly. It was just the air I breathed.
Sure.
And like when I realized that, I was just like, oh my God, this is I don't even know. It was like one of those moments, like, I don't even know what to do now.
Yeah.
Because that's so embedded in me.
Yeah.
Right? Like
my experience is similar in a Black church context because the Black church was made for me.
And not me.
Right.
Yeah.
It was made for me, a Black, straight, cisgender male. So I have been in a lot of those same spaces where like I'm the only straight person there. Because generally people who identify like me are not safe. So they're not welcome into those spaces. And I'm not the only one, but there aren't a lot of us. There aren't a lot of us, which is why I wind up being the only straight person in a lot of different spaces. For me, I came to that point because as a child, I was subjected to a lot of verbal bullying, and I hate bullies. I hate bullies. I just hate it with all of my heart because of how it made me feel as a child. And I saw the way bullies treated other people. So even when I was a kid, like, I didn't like bullies. I was always like bigger than everybody. So I would stand up to bullies if necessary from a physical perspective. But I got a lot of verbal bullying. When I started deconstructing my faith, which is what a good seminary does. Like, I was doing deconstruction before I had the language because I went to a good seminary that gave me permission to question my beliefs. And the reason I got into this space of confrontational ministry that people know me for is because once I started deconstructing and decolonizing my faith, I saw how harmful some of that theology was to so many of my siblings. So I was like, oh, so my theology is bullying a whole lot of my friends and family. So as I move forward in my ministry, the first thing I want to do, top priority, is stop the bullying, reduce the harm. And in doing that kind of work, it paints this picture of me as, and I'm a friendly guy. I'm also a no nonsense guy. You mentioned that earlier. So the persona, particularly if you only see my viral moments on social media, you'll just think I'm always confrontational because, people like controversy. People love when I'm going
algorithm.
off. Yeah. People love when I'm going off and saying cuss words, even though there's like so many more layers to my ministry. And that just has kind of shaped how I show up. Like, I am not going to let theological bullies win when I'm around. You can't do that. We can debate any and everything you want to, but we're not going to debate somebody's humanity. I'm going to stop you in your tracks if you try to debate somebody's humanity with me, because that's harmful. And I refuse to continue practicing this theological abuse, this bullying behavior that is baked into the theology that we just need to question.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you all about too, especially coming from your different perspectives. One of the things that's just happened, we talked about it. Kristian, I think it was you who said this, that what we're experiencing now is what the Black community has been screaming about for forever, and it's just now catching up to the rest of us. Like, rest of us are seeing it or experiencing it. Right. I have said for a while that we're in a season of revealing. Like, you can take all the spirituality out of it, and it doesn't have anything to do with spirituality. It's still a season of revealing. And one of the things that's being revealed now is just the actual motives, right? Like, it's just not even hidden. It's just out in the open. And it's gotten really, I'm even shocked. That's the right word. Shocked at the brazenness of some of the things that are being put out there. So like, late yesterday, Now This Impact and a couple other places posted some of this stuff. Like, we're DHS, we will have our home again. We'll have our home again. One of ours, all of yours.
Oh my God. That freaked me out. Like, that sent chills down my spine.
Yeah, the enemy's at the gate, and they're as knights. Defend the homeland. Remember who you are, American, right? A remigration.
You know what's interesting about this, Joe? And I just real quick, we attribute that to Nazis, but the Nazis attributed that to Americans.
To us. They so did. They
learned from America. And if I got ahead of you, I'm so sorry.
No.
Okay.
But that's all part of it. Talking about the air I breathe, or the, that I grew up in, or the waters that I swim in, right? Yeah. And it's just there. Like, it's not even, I feel like, you brought up Black Panther. I feel like we're in stage 1 of the Marvel movies where the whole point is this secret Nazi organization slowly taking over the government. And then it's like Captain America to save the day. Well, we just don't have one of those. But like, what the hell?
Yeah. Dr. Lisa actually was a contributor to an incredible documentary that I've been telling everybody to watch ever since it came out. And that's Bad Faith. The Bad Faith documentary will tell you a whole lot about the history behind where we are right now. And you know, Dr. Lisa, if you would, because you know, you were in the documentary. I've quoted you. We've done podcast episodes about it.
Oh, wow.
I was actually inspired by the documentary to go read The Power Worshippers, which is the book the documentary was built around. Can you like just speak to that a little bit? Like how the you know, even what you explained in the documentary, like how the plan has been in the works for decades in response to the civil rights movement.
Yeah. You know, there were 3 films that came out that same year, and all 3 were really powerful and all about how did this white Christian nationalism thing happen. Bad Faith was one of the ones that was most well promoted and also really powerful. God and Country, that's Rob Reiner's piece. That was also incredibly well promoted and really powerful, great voices in that. And another one that most people have not seen is True Believer. And it was the story, it was actually another one that I was in, and the story of a woman who came out of white Christian nationalism, and you're really watching her and her mom kind of come out of it. And it's the director, like she's the one who's coming out of it as the film is going through. And so I would say that at the heart of that narrative, one has to understand, again, it's the struggle. It is the civil war we've been fighting the whole time. When the Civil War ended, we had about 11 years of actual freedom where 2,000 people were elected to Black people were elected to public offices across the country after the Civil War in those 11 years. So there were Black senators. I mean, lots of Black senators and House representatives. And, you know, this is in 1867, 1871, 75, all the way up to 1877. And then it all crashed because there was a compromise. And whenever you see compromise in American history, you can bet that the people being compromised are Black folks. We are the ones who are being compromised, or at the very least, it's not white folks. White folks are compromising us. And so, with that compromise, they lifted the protections, the National Guard that was sent down to the South. And next thing you know, we have Jim Crow. So now we have 90 years of Jim Crow. And in that stretch, you have Brown versus the Board of Education, and you have the civil rights movement that comes up after it. The fruit, the 3-legged stool that was like the prize of the civil rights movement are the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the War Against Poverty. And so you have the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the War Against Poverty. These are the things that begin to literally change America. Well, the response to that, you actually see Dr. King reflecting on it in his last book ever, Chaos. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And in that book, he actually said very clearly that the segregationists, read white Christian nationalists today, would rather have an American form of fascism than to have true democracy if democracy required equality. And so throughout the 70s, in response to those 3 major wins of the civil rights movement, you had then the Heritage Foundation began to search for ways to reconsolidate power because they lost big time with the passage of the Voting Rights Act. It was the very first time in American history that people of African descent were franchised, were brought into the franchise and could actually exercise sovereignty over our own bodies and our land and our homes and our communities by electing our own leaders. I shouldn't say the first time. It was the first time since the compromise, right, of 1876. And so with that, you get two major moments. You get this moment where, as a result of the Civil Rights Act and the requirements of desegregation that all rest on Brown versus the Board of Education, you have the IRS sends a letter to Bob Jones University and says to Bob Jones, you are segregating. And because of that, you can no longer be considered tax exempt. And so Bob Jones says, wait a minute. No, we're going to hold on to our segregation. We have a right. They started to fight it through the lens of religion of, we have a right to segregate. They started to fight it through the lens of race, And so they didn't win. They kept, the IRS kept coming back to them and saying, we're going to take away your tax exempt status if you don't desegregate. Well, they let one Black person on their campus. He was a janitor. They literally enrolled the janitor. And so he was the only Black student. And he said, forget this, I'm out of here. He didn't make it even the whole year. He dropped out before the end of the year. So then, the IRS came back and said, we're going to revoke your status. And they said, okay. We're going to allow Black people to be on the campus to actually enroll in our school, but we are going to require them to sign a paper that says they will not date while they are at our school. Or we are only going to have married couples. That was the first one. So then the IRS came back and they said, okay, we'll allow singles to come on, but they can't date. And all the white people had to sign something then too that said, even if I am only a sympathizer with interracial dating, I understand I will be evicted from this campus. I will be thrown out of this school. A sympathizer. And so finally, in 1980, after Heritage Foundation and James Baker and, all of the religious right people that came to be known as the religious right before they were the religious right, they organized around Bob Jones University to try to save Bob Jones University's right to segregate. Now, when they lost in 1983, they lost the battle of Bob Jones v. USA. And that was also the year, actually between 1978 to 1983, those were the years when the religious right consolidated because they lost that battle, but they realized that their struggle to organize in order to protect Bob Jones had actually created something. But they could no longer fight that battle through the framework of race. It was no longer it was no longer gauche, right? So instead, they decided, what is starting to gain traction? Roe v. Wade. So they pivoted to gender. They pivoted to sexuality. And they said, we can win a conservative movement. We can actually build a conservative movement by attaching evangelical Christianity to the conservative political agenda. And we can win the Civil War by creating a culture war. And abortion will be at the center of that. And that is literally what happened. And that is what won. That's why in 2018, when Brett Kavanaugh was up for consideration for the Supreme Court, I worked to organize, I think we got altogether about 20 major influencers around the country, men and women, to call for a pause in the culture wars. We were like, we know that you want to end abortion. And we know that's why you would, push for Kavanaugh. But I don't think you understand that what they really want is the end of Brown v. Board. What they really want is to revoke the Civil Rights Act. And people at that time looked at me like, oh, no, no, God and country, the whole thing, like no abortion. And so culture wars were not paused. And instead we did get Brett Kavanaugh. And what did Brett Kavanaugh give us? The end of abortion and also the evisceration of the 14th Amendment. He went back beyond Brown versus Board of Education, but he said, he, along with the majority, undercut the 14th Amendment, which is birthright citizenship. So here's the thing. What I've come to understand through that experience is that the white evangelicals, and I didn't understand this when I was interviewed for the movie, and I understand it now. The white evangelicals who were organized for that conservative movement were largely in the South. Mm. And, of course, over the last 20 years, it's actually permeated throughout the Northwest, the West, it's permeated. But the ones that they organized at first, it was the South. And, as far north as South Jersey. And they were not only fighting for abortion. The people in the pews, the white evangelicals in the pews were also fighting to maintain a white America. They were just too coy to say it.
The civil rights movement of the 20th century made anti-blackness politically incorrect. Mm-hmm. It did not make white supremacists less anti-black.
That's exactly right.
They just found new ways to impose and implement their anti-blackness. Mm-hmm. And the frustrating part for me is trying to minister and serve Black people who are completely unaware of that.
Yeah.
Who really don't recognize how much race plays into this. Mm-hmm. Because we've made talking about race so taboo. So, you get even liberals and leftists and progressive who are like, no, it's not about race. It's a class war. Yeah, but the working class can't come together if half of them are racist. You can't fight a class war alongside somebody who doesn't believe you deserve human dignity. Mm-hmm. So we can talk about all of the different, we can talk about abortion, we can talk about homophobia and transphobia. And at the end of the day, it comes back to race.
Yeah. I'll say this a little more clearly than what I just did. That all along, the goal was to win the Civil War. The goal was to bring us back to a pre-Brown v. Board world where Plessy versus Ferguson was the law of the land, separate and equal, and where there was no legal protection for the bodies and lives and families and communities of people of African descent. That was the goal. And so when they realized that they could no longer fight that goal through the framework of race, then they turned to abortion, because abortion would give them the ability to do the one thing they needed to do in order to meet that goal. Because everything turned on Brown v. Board. They needed to turn back to that Plessy versus Ferguson era. And the only way to do that was through the Supreme Court. So they needed to turn the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. So when they did, that was the day they won. Mm-hmm. In 2018, they won.
So let me ask you both, because I want to honor your time. And this is going to be a big question, and there's no way you're going to be able to answer it, especially in the time that we have left.
Thank you for understanding that.
Yeah. But as I'm sitting here listening, I've got all kinds of thoughts going through my mind. from my perspective, one of the things that we're going to be talking about this weekend is, we're going to be talking, anytime I talk about race, anytime I address like white Christians, inevitably somebody will be like, number one, I'm woke, but white guilt. You're telling us to feel guilty for being white. And I'm just like, oh my God, that number one, it's so tired. Stop. Nobody said that, number one. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I'm going to be talking about this weekend is like, okay, it's not your fault, but it's still your responsibility. You know what I mean? Like, it's as a white Christian man, these things are my responsibilities to confront, to untangle, to whatever. And I have found that so many are unwilling. And I don't know if that's just because comfort, or I don't know why. So I guess my question is just, where do we go? Where do we go from here?
It's MLK's question.
Yeah. And it's so funny you said that, because I'm literally rereading that right now. Yeah. I'm almost done with it again, just thinking through like the next several weeks of what we're going to be talking about here at our church. Yeah.
1967, he wrote that book.
And he could have written it yesterday.
He literally could have written yesterday.
Yeah.
You want to take a stab at that, Kristian, first?
Because I'm thinking, because the church that I pastor at, it's a majority white church, right? It's progressive, more progressive, and so those spaces are largely white, and it just is. So, like, I'm looking at this, and I'm going to be looking at the crowd, and that's what I was thinking. Like, what do I say to a majority white church?
Okay, I do want to jump in here.
Yeah, do it, please.
Context helps, right? Majority white church. Where do we go from here? We accept our humanity. We repent for trying to be God. Mm-hmm. We accept our humanity, our dirtness, our clayness, our flesh, infleshedness, our finiteness, our unsupremeness, our not knowingness. You see, because what it means to be white philosophically, there's a really, really amazing book called Toward a Theory of Race. I'm getting it wrong. Toward an Idea of Race. And it's an incredible, incredible book. I highly recommend it. It's very academic though. So, I mean, the average reader is not going to read that whole book, but you might just read the introduction. It's enough. It really is enough to kind of get it. But one of the theories put forward by this incredible philosopher, she's Brazilian, by the way, Black Brazilian, and she says that whiteness, she actually doesn't define it this way. I have come to understand it this way. But she says there's such a thing as the transparent ones. She calls them the transparent. And the transparent, she says, that is, in my understanding, she's talking about whiteness. That as a power, whiteness is able to exist and rule our world when it is not seen, when it goes unseen, when it's not called forward, when it's not pointed out. And when it is not pointed out and called forward, and when it's unseen, it takes the place at the center of the room always. And all things are oriented around it. And it orders the world around itself, right? It takes the role of the one, just like you said, Joe, the one to whom it has been ordained should order the world. This is what the transparent ones just simply do. But in my theological, in my theological read of that, I mean, I know that that's actually only one being in all the universe is supposed to take that place, and that's God. So what does it mean to quote, be white, deemed white? What is whiteness? Not the people, but the thing, the power. It is to contend with God for supremacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what it is. And so the next step, you ask, what's the next step? It is to discover again, maybe for the first time since the Greek Empire, the first time in 3,000 years, your mere humanity. I once asked this question and it blew my own mind. When was the last time that a white man or white men entered any room anywhere in the world and did not think, I should be leading this?
My God.
I asked that a few years ago and you just basically said, this is what you were taught. Like, yeah, right. To think. And I really searched my mind and I realized you have to go back beyond the Greek Empire. It's those days before the Greek Empire. There was not that assumption. But in the Greek Empire, you got Aristotle and you got Plato, but Aristotle especially with dualism, which creates the rubric for supremacy and domination. And that is just all up in the blood and sinews of whiteness. That needs to be purged. And I think that what white folk will find when they purge that of themselves and their thinking is, wow. So this is the freedom that God intended for us, to be mere humans and not little g gods, supposing to control all things. This is what it feels like to have actual faith that actually does lean on God and doesn't try to control all things. It's freedom.
Mm-hmm. I say. I echo everything Dr. Lisa just said, and I'll just add on from a different perspective. One of the most famous sayings in the Black community in the 20th century is, "The revolution will not be televised," by Gil Scott-Heron. He was a poet who was a foreshadowing of hip hop and soul and neo soul. And what he meant when he said that is that the revolution begins in the mind. That's why it won't be televised. You can't put a camera on what's happening in the mind. So the revolution begins here. And so the revolution begins with unlearning some things. And I always say, as an adaptation of Bell Hooks, who says love is an act of will, I say all the time, unlearning is an act of will. You have to be willing to do the work of unlearning. So I generally start people in this process of unlearning their bigotry, unlearning their supremacy. And I do this with Black people too, because when I'm working with Black people, I address the bigotry within our community. So it's the same thing with white people. Jesus was asked by an attorney, "How do I inherit eternal life?" And he responded with a story. We know it as the Good Samaritan story. I don't call it the Good Samaritan story because Jesus didn't call the Samaritan good. Jesus just said it was a Samaritan. When you put the qualifier on Samaritan to call the Samaritan good, you're actually playing into the bias. Oh, this is the Good Samaritan.
Wow, that's good.
Kind of like, I'm the articulate Black guy. Like that's different. No, the Samaritan was just a Samaritan. He tells a story of a man going down a road and he was attacked by robbers, presumably from his own culture. They left him for dead. Then multiple people, presumably from his own culture, walked by and saw him on the street and did nothing for their various reasons. They left him for dead as well. Then the Samaritan from another opposing culture, the culture that they didn't mess with, the culture that they thought was bad, the Samaritan comes by and he gets close enough to the man to see that he was still alive. And the Samaritan bandaged his wounds and took him and got him further medical treatment and paid for his recovery. Right. So in our context, think of that as like, there was a white man who got beat up by a white man, and then a bunch of white men walked by and left him for dead. And then a black man came by and said, let me help you. Let me bandage your wounds. And then Jesus asked the attorney after he told that story, so who was the neighbor in this story? Because when the attorney asked him, how do I inherit eternal life? The response initially was, love God with your heart, soul, mind, and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And the attorney's response was, well, then who is my neighbor? And that's why Jesus told the story of the Samaritan. So when he gets to the end of the story of the Samaritan, he says, okay, after that story, who is your neighbor? And the attorney said, the one that showed mercy. Here's what I love about this. We generally teach the Samaritan story from the perspective of be like the Samaritan. But that's not what Jesus points to when he asks that question at the end of the story. He doesn't really want you to merely be like the Samaritan. He says, who was the neighbor, the one that showed mercy? So he asked the attorney to put himself in the position of the person that was left for dead. So when it comes to answering who is my neighbor, the question is not so much who would you help if somebody else left them for dead, but who would you allow to help you if somebody left you for dead? If you were lying in a ditch, would you disqualify somebody from saving your life because of how they identify? If you were on your last breath, would you refuse help because that person was trans or black or a woman or disabled or gay? Now, some white people got to deal with the fact that they would disqualify that person. And that's a level of hatred with which I cannot identify. And there's some deeper work there. But for the people who would say, I wouldn't disqualify anybody from saving my life because I want to live. And if it's a black person that's there to save my life, I'm going to let them save my life because I want to live. But then that's your neighbor. And then you have a responsibility to your neighbor, that you love your neighbor as yourself. So if you want to have life, you should want your neighbor to have life. If you want dignity, you should want your neighbor to have dignity. If you want a good job, you should want your neighbor to have a good job. If you want voting rights, you should want your neighbor to have voting rights. And that's where I think people need to start. Like, who's your neighbor? Because if it's just white people, you're missing the whole plot. You're missing the whole plot of Jesus. But so much of our understanding of Jesus has been shaped through colonialism and whiteness. So it starts with developing the will to unlearn it.
Amen.
That's all I got.
Listen, I wish I had you all for like another hour or two because I have so many other things. But anyway, just thank you both so much for your time and your wisdom and the work that you're doing. Literally, not only life-saving work, and I don't say this just because I mean this, but life-saving work, but democracy-saving work, because so much of what we're seeing is rooted in the very things that you've been talking about over the last hour. And that unlearning, that willingness to unlearn, that willingness to hear what you said, Dr. Lisa, those are going to be things that save this democracy. I mean, there are other things that have to happen too, but like at the root of it, right? So just thank you both so much for your time and your wisdom and your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I do want to say the book that I referenced is Toward a Global Idea of Race. And the author is Denise Ferreira da Silva.
Awesome. We'll have that in the show notes. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we'll have in the show notes too for people to follow you if they're not aware of you all or want to learn more. So that'll all be in there. Thanks for following along, everybody listening in. I hope that this conversation was as enlightening for you as it was for me. Don't forget, you might be the only voice of reason that somebody hears today, so don't be afraid to use it. All right, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
That's it.
That's fabulous.